We ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our training program. Today, we start the third module, Taking Action, Experiences and Tools of Activism and Lawyering. As you know, as the participants already know, the idea is to build on the direct experience of grassroots organizations and activist groups which run projects or initiatives of support of migrants or refugees in different contexts across Europe, in order to offer to the participants an introduction, at least an introduction or an overview to skills and basic knowledge about project design, management, and fundraising that can be useful to start new initiatives or to develop existing grassroots projects. So we start today this third module with a lesson which focuses on legal clinics, and in particular on the role of students in this kind of activity and projects, which are, let's say, across academy and activism. Next Thursday, we will instead have a lesson dedicated to an interesting project which promotes the internal mobility in Europe of third state nationals by Migration Miteinander, which is a partner of this project, of our project. Then we will take a small break over the Christmas period, and we will start again with the last 4 lessons of the training program on the 10th of January of the next year. I want just to thank you all for being here, to thank our guests for having accepted our invitation, and I turn the floor over to Ulrich Stege, who you know very well, who will introduce and coordinate today's lesson. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I will today give you an overview about, let's say, students' activism. Clearly designed in a way, the last years at least, in many countries, as particularly in the law faculties, driven by law students, but not only. So students that come from different backgrounds are engaged often in the so-called legal clinics. I will explain a bit how this give you a bit overview what it is actually a legal clinic for those who have maybe not heard about this in particular. But then I will hand it over to the different students, ex-students of 4 different clinics we have here. 2 from Italy, 1 from Spain, and 1 from Berlin. And you will see that the experiences might be sometimes completely different, but they certainly have something very strong in common, which is that students through the clinic, through the work that they're doing in the clinic, are providing very useful support on the one hand to migrants in terms of legal support often. This is the main aspect of the law clinics anyway, but not only, they also contribute to, let's say, reflection about the law, producing useful material in terms of how the practice is working or not working, more or less. They have a quite important role inside of the, let's say, getting law schools, law faculties, or the legal field somehow be more active and activism. or activism being created somehow. So anyway, I will start with a very short introduction, and then I will give the hand over to the students, ex-students of different law clinics that will tell you exactly what their what the difference are and how they actually are involved in clinical legal education, how we call it. I will have a short presentation from my side, which I'm just showing here, and hopefully it will come now. Yep. Okay, so here you can also see where I come from. So I'm in the Migrants' Rights Clinic of the International University College of Turin. I'm coordinating this law clinic project, and Paula, who is with me here today, has helped, was a former student and has helped this year in particular, and she will tell more about what she's doing there, but she had helped the coordination in particular this year, which I'm very grateful for. Thank you. What I'm just wanted to say very shortly is actually giving you a quick introduction what clinics are doing. And I think it is important to highlight actually the context in which kind of situation often, and where basically the law clinics often come from. First of all, I think we find even before clinics have started to being created, we find ourselves in a context where different kind of crises have been identified, not only by students, but we will see also that some clinics have really been created by students. So sometimes it's really a students-driven activity through the identification of this kind of context. So the different crises that you all know, but also the often high number of migrants in need of a constant support. That's very important. Other aspect is that often in legal education, we are missing a sort of clear critical approach and a vision how the law works in practice. I think often it is in our sort of context, often a law teaching method is used that provides a very positivist approach, that meaning that you show what the law is and should be, but you don't show actually how the law in practice would be translated and how complicated it is sometimes to get the right, which might be really bright and interesting, getting practically accessed. And specifically in the field of migration law, we often had even the discussions whether it is actually is it not problematic to some extent to show how badly the law, which sometimes we don't really like as neither, but sometimes the law is even not 100% let's say put in practice by the public authorities. So you can see a lot of violation coming specifically from public actors in the field of migration law. And there is a lot of discussions also ongoing whether it's actually interesting to show this to law students as an educational method, because you really see that to some extent you educate people to behave on the rule of law, but at the same time you see that public authorities are not behaving on the rule of law. Anyway, this is an interesting approach, and what is really missing often is a sort of very critical approach, and that's why clinics have also been created. And there is, in the end, a lack of professionals working in this field, in particular in the legal sphere, while you do have potentially psychologists, anthropologists, social worker working in this field since a long time already. Lawyers have been missing out in this area. So this is the context, and in this context, law clinics, whether it has been created, and we will see some examples of them, by students and students' activism, or whether it has been created because some of the teachers found themselves in this really weird situation of this context described and wanted to change something. In all those situations, the law clinics played a quite important role together with the students. What is law clinics? Actually, it is trying to change something which is here called by Paulo Freire as the banking model of education, that somebody would just teach and you get the knowledge inside of you, but you don't experience the law. Now clinics is something which is changing exactly this kind of context. You learn by doing, and in the meantime you produce something which has a social value for those people that you provide a certain benefit for. Why, and it gives a bit of context at why this has been created. Maybe one take, and a lot of clinics would agree with this, clinicians would agree with this, is you cannot see to some extent the law in its full practice without seeing the understanding of the political battles that struggles that are existing. You have to understand that the law is something which is political in any sense. So you need to get to the struggles themselves, and the struggles for social justice in particular. Then you understand actually the law from the bottom up somehow. And this is something which Duncan Kennedy has highlighted since long time, specifically in his book on legal education and the reproduction of hierarchy, which is something which in our law faculties is one of the most striking problems, which affects the society quite strikingly. So law clinics try to change this and look at the struggles in particular. And another sort of citation is that we want really to create something which has a social value and which educates actually a new generation of lawyers. So this is sort of the idea sometimes behind those clinics that have been created from let's say from law teachers that wanted to change something in legal education sphere. I give you some ideas what the European Network for Clinical Legal Education is saying on law clinics. It has created a sort of definition, which you can find on the website as well, which provides an idea that this is a teaching method, but which creates not only knowledge, but also skills and value, but is also very specifically producing a social justice aspect. And you will see as well, sometimes clinics have this to balance this kind of education aspect with the social justice aspect, which often the social justice aspect is the most important one, at least for students, highlighted at least. So just in key elements of such a law clinics is that students are the main actors. They are doing basically the work, working on real benefit cases and with real benefit beneficiaries. Sorry for this mistake here. It's teaching in the terms not only is not focusing on the content of law, but also on skills and values. There is always in the clinic sphere a supervision by some expert. Could be group supervision, could be supervision on individual cases, depending on the structure of the clinic. And you do have incorporated, all the clinics have to somehow a reflection about the practice of the law. This is a very important aspect. And it is also something which is attached often, not always, but often in the field of social justice, meaning providing something which has a social value. Very quickly to structure, how clinics are structured, often you see different elements. First of all, you have a preparation period, then a practical activity period, and a supervision reflection period. All those clinics that I know, whether they're students run or academically run, do exactly the same. So that you train with different aspects, how to interview clients, how to have knowledge about migration, asylum law, for example. And then as soon as they are trained, or while they're trained, they start to practice and provide legal support to migrants and asylum seekers. We will come to another aspect which is quite important. Often clinics incorporate a multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary approach. Paula from our clinic can give you a more concrete example on this. And when we talk about the practical activities, part of providing let's say, legal support, it is also often involved in strategic litigation, in clinical legal research, and legal awareness, so-called street law activities or advocacy. So you can see, preparation phase, practical phase, supervision phase, and reflection. Let me just say, often what I experience is, and hopefully it comes also from the experiences of the different places, is that you create practically a sort of community of practice. Students are in small teams are this kind of community of practice, together with supervisors at times, creating this kind of community, which actually creates also quite interesting learning experience, but also an experience which often creates a dynamic of activism. I think that's something we want to show you when we talk about law clinics very often, is that this is a very interesting methodology in a certain way to create a sort of movement of activism. So I stop here for the moment, and I know that our Valencia group needs to go quite quickly. So I would hand it over to you. Maybe what I would advise you, maybe you can present yourself quickly, and then of course you talk about your experience, but also how actually this have affected you as a student or as an ex-student. I don't know exactly in your case, but or whether and how actually you think the clinic in a certain way, and this is essentially for all the different students now interviewed, how do you think the clinic actually provides a sphere of creation of activism in the area of migration and asylum law? So I would stop here, and I would hand over to our colleagues from Valencia, Spain, please.
Okay. So, do you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'm Laura.
And I'm Yaitha.
Yes. We are students of the Master of Human Rights, Democracy and International Justice in the University of Valencia. And this is our second year in collaboration with the legal clinic of our university. First of all, to say that it's a pleasure to be here with you, and I think it's very useful to share the experience with other colleagues, because even though, as you said, all the legal clinics have a similar structure, I think that each one of them has a particularity and works in a special context that makes our society better and make the law students more conscious about the social justice. So at first, we want to show you how our clinic is structured. And then we are going to talk about some current cases that we are working on, actually, about the migrant people issues. So the legal clinic of the University of Valencia is divided in 5 clinics. This division, it's important because each one of the clinics is focused in a different matter, and each one of them is directed by a professor that is a specialist in that matter. So that's important when you are a student, that the person who is revising the work that you are doing, it's a a person,
work.
yes, who is a person that is very well formed in this matter. So first of all, we have a public interest clinic in which we analyze social cases related to general interest issues, as it could be environmental cases and political and historical research. And we also have an international human rights clinic in which we as students participate in cases with an humanitarian background. And last year, for example, we did an amicus curiae in a judgment in Colombia about a human rights violation. And we also did for different NGOs country of origin information reports. Continue.
Okay, and then we have the penitentiary clinic, and our work principally is to give advice to people who is in prison or ex-prisoners. And then we have the migration law clinic that consists in the realization of different reports about migrant rights and international matters of protection, and the direct attention that is basically we bring legal advisement for people in situation of vulnerability and request of NGOs. And now we are going to show you the cases that we are doing this year.
Okay, so as you know, and as global context is showing us lately, migrant people issues are the center of interest of many NGOs and civil society collectivities. So for this reason, we are going to explain some of these cases that we are working on. First of all, now we are working with the NGO CESIDA, that in Spain is like the most relevant coordinator for people with AIDS or HIV. So their work embraces sexual education and prevention as much as citizen participation in political strategies about AIDS and sharing supporting tools and relevant information for people who need it. What are we exactly doing and how it comes with migrant people? So currently we are working on a report about the warranty of access to healthcare for people who has been transmitted the virus and whose administrative situation in Spain is irregular. We are analyzing the Spanish law in aim to determine how the process to achieve antiretroviral medication works in the different Spanish regions. What are we seeing doing this report is that this process of achieving the medication is not the same in all the Spanish regions, and it shows a lack of equality in the application of law. So the conclusions of our report will be used for CESIDA, for that coordinator, to implement new politics, new political strategies in the different regions of Spain, so there's more equality in that kind of law.
Okay, the other case that we are carrying out is the Ukraine case. So the students of the legal clinic have developed a questionnaire to interview Ukrainian refugees in the Valencian community. So the purpose of this case is do a questionnaire about take knowledge about war crimes committed in the Ukraine-Russia conflict and give support to the victims. So the questionnaire has been jointly developed with two other legal clinics of the Valencian community, the Legal Clinic of Alicante and the Legal Clinic of Castellón. And these interviews are made to collaborate with the investigation that the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court is realizing about war crimes in the conflict. So now it's like paused because Christmas, and for the moment that's it in this case.
Yes, and as you said, like in other legal clinics, another important thing of our labor in the legal clinic is that we usually do street law formations I think that most of you know that it consists in go to NGOs or another social, another NGOs and associations that need a special formation in some law matters that they don't know. And in our case, we do this in the penitentiary clinic for the ex-prisoners to eliminate their
cancelación de antecedentes.
like the penalty antecedents, so they can eliminate them from the administration register. And we also do this with the people who need international protection. And in a more practical way, the last thing that we are doing in our clinic is that we collaborate with a very important lawyer in Valencia that is called Carmen Cabrera. She's an immigration law specialist, and she usually comes to the legal clinic and shows us the cases she's normally working on. She lets us help her with the strategies she could take, and this is especially interesting for us in terms of learning legal skills. It allows us as students to cross the academic line and see how a truly human rights defender works like in courts, and how she solves the complex administrative net around the immigration and international protection issues. So more or less, that's barely all the things that we do in the legal clinic of University of Valencia. And I don't know if you have any question or you would like to know more about something in special. We are open to answer all your questions.
Thank you so much. Maybe just one before we go on to next. One would be interesting is that from your perspective as a student, what has the clinic for you changed? So as a student, what is different in terms of to other courses, or what it put it into you as a student, so to speak? And whether you also feel that this has created a sort of movement amongst you, not only you as an individual, but as a group of students. So, and how this actually has been created. I don't know. Maybe just words about this would be interesting. What your experience was in Spain.
Okay, so in the Spanish case, legal clinic is important because, as you know, the Plan Bologna in our universities has made that the bachelors now are very practical and very focused on the layer work. Like, it's very important to know all the law and the legislation of your country, but when you are in legal clinic, you learn how social movements has a lot of pressure on the political issues and on the law. So if you are like close to the social movements, you learn how to be a better lawyer and a better jurist in a way that you can use your knowledge for helping the people, and not only for finishing working in a big company, only focusing yourself. And I think that's the important thing of being in the clinic, that to be a jurist or to be a lawyer is not only working in big companies or doing a lot of political important things. If you are not concerned about how your society, your city, your country is going, and you don't know how to apply your juridic or legal knowledge in the favor of your society, you are like not getting all the potential that a law student should have.
For me, what Laura said for me is correct. So I think too that we can help a lot of people. We cannot solve all the problems, but we can help a lot of people in different matters. For example, last year we went to an NGO to talk about issues migrant issues like family reunification, acquisition of nationality. And I think it's a good option to help a lot of people and to know the laws and these things. I think it's the great opportunity.
Yes, and for example, in the Bachelor of Law in Spain, a lot of subjects related to human rights, migration law, and all of that are optative.
Yeah.
So if you don't take that optative subjects, or if you don't do an internship in the legal clinic, maybe you're finishing your law degree without knowing anything about international protection, about migrant people issues, about administrative issues of environment. So
yeah,
that kind of things that are considered more social in Spain are being put in away of the degree of law. So the legal clinic is a good opportunity to take all of this in account and to be a better jurist and a more conscious jurist.
Yeah, because I think that here in Spain, the major of people is like, oh my God, civil law, crime law is like the best, and then humanitarian law, that is so important, is like apart. And yeah, it's disgusting for me, but we are here to take
change
care.
that. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think it's interesting what you say is that, and that's something which obviously is something which is part of the motivation to introduce law clinics more mainstream in the curriculum, is that in fact you're right. I think law schools or law faculties at the moment are really traditional often, but as they are so important in our societies, because lawyers play an important role in our societies, it's important to show whatever kind of law comes out of it, the sort of problematic sides of the law. And I think that's everybody needs to have this kind of vision to some extent, and law clinics can have a contribution to this. So thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you.
I would I don't know, Paula, it's fine with you if we switch to the Turing example and then going further in the next experience.
Yeah, unless another law clinic wanted to go before us.
Okay. So who wants to go first?
Because I talk a lot. So.
Of course. Okay, good. Let's get Paula in the end so that she will be held by the moment of. So what about? Yeah, let's go to a complete different example, because I think what is interesting to learn is the Berlin example as well. They do have a very interesting approach, coming completely from not top down, a professor annoyed about teaching normally, wanted to change something and change the law teaching and using the law clinic. But here is a movement where actually students have started a movement now years back already, but it's still ongoing in the same way, and handed over to some extent to different generation of students to manage a law clinic, which is managed still very much 100%, I guess, by students. So Noah, do you want to enlighten us about your model, which I think is a very interesting one?
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting us to speak here about our law clinic. I will start with like a brief introduction and a short overview about like how our law clinic became what it is right now. And Paula will follow up, because as you just pointed out so interestingly, we wish we had a professor. For the longest time, we've been fighting hard with the university to finally introduce a chair for migration law, and we are happy that it seems now to be the time, and soon there will be at least a 5-year tenure for a chair in migration law in Humboldt University in Berlin. So that's exciting for us. But yeah, to briefly introduce our law clinic, it was founded in 2015, started in 2014, somehow the ideas about it, inspired actually by Law Clinic Göttingen, which I think practices since 2009 already. So far more advanced than ours. And we had a group of students. I myself joined in 2017. So when I became part of the law clinic, it was already an established concept at the Humboldt University. And on the matter of personal notes, I think it was really one of the reasons I continued the road down to becoming like to finish my law degree. I think I wouldn't have done it without that, because I didn't feel any purpose after 2 years of studying law. I don't know if some of you might be able to relate to that. So yeah, we were completely student funded, so everything was organized by the students. We had to find a teacher, and in Germany it's not so easy to find a professor to even teach our class, so we can be able to go out and practice the law. And there was a huge need, and that's how it all started, because as you all know, in 2015, many refugees arrived in Germany, and there was just a huge gap of legal advice. So there was a practical need, as you pointed out. It fits really, really well, Ulrich, that there was a practical need, and the students wanted to find a solution and see what we can do to contribute. And as law students, you rarely can contribute anything, but there we thought, yeah, maybe we can find somebody who's able to teach us. And yeah, so our law clinic came to be, and now we have excuse me, I have to, excuse me, quickly, my nose. Sorry, I'm not that well. Yeah, and now we have a 1-year training cycle with brilliant minds who teach a first semester of introduction into asylum and migration law, and a second practical semester where we teach like the practical application of the law. And it's become one of the biggest and most popular student organizations. And what I find like the most interesting is that this kind of created a hub where more organizations within the organization started, because now we have 11 counseling teams all over Berlin working independently, managing themselves. We have the structure of the law clinic with a board completely managed by students. But then there were new topics popping up since 2017. Like we saw that the externalization forced us to also move to the borders of Europe. So one of the group within the law clinic decided to create the law clinic on Samos, which is like a Greek island, where we started to provide with a small team legal advice. And also this small organization has now grown and became its own thing, and is now also another organization. It's called I Have Rights, and it's still practicing legal advice on Samos. And another project like this is, for instance, in 2020, the European Court of Justice decided that Germany should grant Syrians who fled from military service, that they should have been given asylum, like under the Geneva Convention, and not only the subsidiary protection. So we saw there a change of law, and we decided to make a whole project where we do I think between 40 and 50 applications for subsequent asylum applications for people who really said, I do want to have my rights to get this, to get the political asylum under the Geneva Convention. And same with like when the situation in Afghanistan changed, or now the Ukrainian situation. There's always been like a group within the law clinic who said, okay, we have to do something about this. And it's like a moving construct, which is so interesting, and at the same time so dependent on like the people who are within it. And I think now we are really at a point of change somehow, because this generation is growing out, people are becoming lawyers, working somewhere else. So for us, really the struggle is, how do we keep this going? How do we institutionalize this whole thing? And there comes somehow the view in the future and what we are working on now. And my colleague Paula will tell you a bit more about what's going to happen next with the Berlin Law Clinic. Thank you. Thanks so much. And sorry for my voice.
Hi, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really glad to be here. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the organization and the challenges that we are facing and how we wish to proceed in the future. I have just finished the training cycle over 1 year, which Nora already briefly described. And I have been starting to be a consultant in one of the teams in Berlin. Yeah, and we have a prospect of getting a chair at the university, at the Humboldt University in Berlin. And so far we have only been a student-based organization, and the cooperation with the university was good in the past, but no actual lectures at migration law have been offered in the course of study. And the chair that will be established now is a big step, although in comparison maybe to some chairs that are now also established for health law, the contractual design for those chairs is still a little different in treatment to the chair for migration law, because the time is is limited and it's a little more restrictive. So that is, I guess, one of the challenges we're facing, or one of the developments that we're still waiting for how that will turn out in the future. Another point I quickly wanted to add is about the organization, because it was talked about supervision before, and I think one of the big advantages of the refugee law clinic in Berlin is the huge network it is attached to. There is an umbrella organization, which is the Refugee Law Clinic Germany, and in pretty much every bigger city in Germany there are refugee law clinics now, and also within Berlin, the law clinic is connected to other organizations in other fields of expertise, and we are also connected to a network of lawyers that we recommend, or that are recommended to us, that if a case that comes up in a consultation is for us maybe necessary to redirect to a lawyer, then we have contacts that we can rely on. And they also do the supervision of the teams. Most of the teams have an individual supervisor, but there's also a supervisor that is attending to all the teams where more challenging cases can be discussed, so that everyone within a consultation team can maybe learn from the challenges the other teams are facing. Another challenge we're facing is that since we're only a student-based organization, and the course of study is sometimes maybe a little less, well, there's a big fluctuation, and we're working on systems and mechanisms that we would like to establish to pass on knowledge from generation to generation as people enter or exit the law clinics, and to help new boards to start new projects, but also continue the old projects. And and to maintain a structure. So right now, we're waiting for a new assembly of all the members, and probably in January or February, a new board will be voted, and we are excited for the new year and how things are going to develop also after COVID, because I think a big enrichment that this activism is bringing to us as students is also the personal contact with other organizations, with each other, and practicing law face to face with people. And I think after COVID, it is exciting to come back and to advise people again in real life. But we also extended our program to digital consultation, and I think we I guess took that with us into the future from the pandemic, to also be able to offer digital consultation for people that can't realize to come into a room. And one last point I quickly wanted to talk about is that we, as a mainly white organization with students and members that come from rather privileged backgrounds, also want to work on us as an organization, how we conduct ourselves, and we therefore changed our statute and introduced a quota to the board that promotes people with different backgrounds, and we try to be aware of difficult concepts that we don't want to establish in our structure. Yes. Okay. I think that's it from me.
Thank you, Paula and Nora. I think it's interesting what you say. First of all, you don't have to say we're only a students managed group. I think what you're doing is extremely interesting, and specifically it has shown over the last years that the power of the refugee law clinic in Berlin, but also the entire movement in Germany on the refugee law clinics, actually something which is really, really interesting. Also from let's say how to create a movement, how to engage active participation of students, how to create space where new ideas can be created, where you also drift, and you demonstrated quite well. You somehow you saw the need of working on the externalization, at least maybe not you specifically, but the clinic as such. At a certain time, it was important to shift the attention also to the externalization of the borders, and then to engage in such an activity. And I can tell you, I have followed this slightly from let's say a distance, but I can tell you that I was amazed how actually a very improbable project has taken off with this Summers project in Greece, which nobody would really understand whether that would be feasible or not feasible. Nobody really cared about this in the beginning, and they just took it off. So I think that's also very interesting to see that this would not have been created inside of an academic institution without, let's say, the activism and the freedom of the students' movement as such, and also the liberty to take up a certain action. I think that would not have been possible to create. So I think it's a very interesting example of, and actually I had many discussions with colleagues from you, former colleagues from you, specifically asking yourself, specifically refugee law clinic and building, asking yourself whether they want to be completely incorporated in the Humboldt University structure, or whether they want to be a part still as a management project. And I'm pretty sure this is still part of the discussions. While I think everybody is happy about, as we mentioned, the fact that Humboldt University finally takes care of sort of incorporate a course into a on migration law and refugee law clinics into the curriculum. But I think it's also important that you keep on sort of your independence in a certain way to create a sort of movement that you have created over time. So I think that's a really interesting example. Let me just, before I'm going to Martina, who also has a very interesting example to show, also a sort of example of how a clinic which might have been a bit more created by a law professor who was annoyed at those time, but who created an environment which actually took a lot of possibility to create something very special as well. But I wanted to say something which is important before we talk about law clinics in working in the field of migration law. Basically, in none of those universities that are here present, migration law was a subject of teaching. That's very interesting to say. You told us about the Humboldt law situation, Humboldt law's faculty situation. None of the courses actually talked about migration law. Maybe in the course of human rights, you had maybe somebody talking rightly about some aspects of migration law, but not really 100% as a course. Same has been true in Turin. When we started our law clinic, this was the first course ever in all Piedmont region on migration law. Same, I think, in Rome. In Valencia, I guess it's the same. It's also showing that actually the law clinic movement, to some extent, installed something inside of the curriculum, which is now present, which was before not existing. And the law clinic really had an important role in this. Martina, now to your example.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm going to present just to show you some picture about us. Not only one moment. That's it. This one. Okay, so I'm going to present. Yeah. So I am Martina from Roma 3 Legal Clinic, and today my presentation is about how to start to become a good lawyer. Then we arrive to be terrible activists. Actually, that's not true. My presentation is actually my personal experience in Roma 3 Legal Clinic. I'm a former student of this clinic, and then I also finished my PhD about immigration law in the same field last year. So it's a very personal, it's also a very personal experience that I want to share with you. And so I just want to start to tell something about Roma 3 Legal Clinic, that is a legal clinic active in law department in Roma 3 University in the city of Rome. And it's about especially migration laws. The clinic was founded in 2010. It's important to me just to remember this period of time because I think it's important for the rest of the presentation, because it was founded by professors, researchers, and students in a very peculiar, particular moment of Italian history. It was a period where government started some kind of reform of education and also immigration law. And the student, but also migrants and the social movement responded with the so-called Onda movement, the wave where migrants were really important in this social movement in that period. So that the clinic started the activities in 2012, and of course, like all university clinic, academic clinic, not all, but most of them have a sort of frontal lesson, so the normal lesson teaching about asylum law and immigration law. And I want to stress that also during the lessons, the students participate in a really active way, and they also usually present and ask and organize with the professors seminars and lecturers with also other experts in immigration fields, so also with the association, NGOs, and so on. But the most important things and special thing of Roma 3 Legal Clinic is the front office that was founded in the same period, and is a real front office. In Italian we call it sportello for migrants and asylum seekers. And usually we have more or less 200 clients or migrants that ask legal consultant to us, and in 10 years we become a really well-known reality that work in this field in Rome. So we started many many collaboration with NGOs, association that are in the city and they are active in this field. But probably, and this is the core of the presentation, the most important thing is that in 2013-14, we decided to found a different association, a student association outside the university, outside the academic context, and we founded students and former students of the clinic founded Diritti di Frontiera. In English is Borders Law Association. And I'm very proud of the logo. I think it's really riot. And we decided to found this association because, of course, staying in the university, we have the possibility, of course, to meet students and stay in an academic context that is always interesting, I think. But I think that me and the other student at that time really wanted to have more space also to participate and start different kind of project and not just stay in the box that university sometimes give to the clinics, or not, or to try to enlarge the web of subject with which collaborated, for example, activists or social movements, all kind of movements and realities that usually and unfortunately didn't collaborate or cooperate with universities in Italy. And so, for example, we start a very important cooperation with the feminist realities in the city of Rome, and we also participated to different struggles and start to participate to assembly and moments of thinking about feminism and borders between the students and the other activists of this movement in Rome and in Italy. Then just to give some example of how the students, me first of all, but all the students of the association and the clinic decide to participate actively to activist moments of the city. We had this famous case of 69 Nigerian woman asylum seekers that were intercepted and in the sea and transferred to the detention center of Roma, where we started to follow them, to give them legal consultant. And and in the end, they were unlawfully deported back in Nigeria. And with some association, we tried to block the plan in the airport of Fiumicino, actually. Fortunately, we didn't have any legal problems for this. But yeah, this is what the kind of enthusiasm that that come from the students and from the simple legal consultant. We start also to think about strategy and activist moments and strategic action to to support migrants in their struggles. So another activities that we started out independently from the clinic, from the university in the association is the legal consultant to the very famous squat in Rome, where many migrants lives. Is one of the most important squats in the city. Is Salam Palace. And also we started to go in the south part of Italy in agriculture fields, where many migrants work there. And it's just some examples of what we start to do by with the association. And most of this project, of this activity, I think is very important to stress it. These activities come directly from a proposal of the students, because they maybe have known that kind of reality, for example, Salam Palace, or they have known, like in this case, some of legal operators who worked in reception centers. And here we start also this important moment or action of legal consultant to trafficked women in some reception center, where we know the legal operators or the administrative staff, and they sent to our front office some of the women because they didn't have any kind of other support. And then, sorry, I just skipped. Yeah, but in the end, we have also some legal problems. No, it's not true. In 2018, we also participated to this Stay Human moment and struggle. It was the period of when the Italian government were blocking ONGs at the sea. I don't know if you remember the famous case of, for example, like Joe Barents in this year. And so we participated to this action, this moment in front of Italian Minister of Transport with other activists and associations. And in the end, last year we started these two projects for the support, for legal consultant support to LGBTQ asylum seekers, with another association really well known in Rome for the support to LGBT people, Libellula. and also the legal support to Ukrainian refugees with another big, very big and well-known association that is Refugees Welcome Italia. And so thanks to these activities, this is the first moment, the start date of the project about LGBTQ migrants, where the students, we organized this event in the university, and was really nice event, because the guests, the speakers were both lawyers and legal experts, but also activists in especially transgender people rights. So it was really interesting. And we also participated to the Transgender Day of Remembrance, to this very big event in Rome last November. And so in the end, is just not to say, it's not just example about us. It's not just a way to show how many activities we do, but is to stress that in my experience, and probably in the experience of my colleagues, start to study immigration law and then practice in legal clinic, transform in some way our lives and our perspective of social justice and social inclusion. And from this, we decide to create something, to create, but not to create something new, but really linked to the legal clinic, but with the purpose of also have tried to change something, not just starting from the law, but also from struggles and the relationship with the place and the other activists' realities who lives in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Martina. I think this was really interesting, showing at the same time also something which maybe has not been said so much by the others, but it's certainly something which is, and I know this very well, embedded in all the different experiences as well, is that one of the key aspects of law clinics is actually embedded in the fact that the clinics are cooperating with a number of actors outside, and you demonstrated really well how this cooperation ends up in something very interesting, engaging for the students, but at the same time also trying to engage in a very specific way with the civil society. So I think that was really interesting. I would hand over. I saw Kelly's questions. Thank you so much for your questions. We will come to these questions in a second. I would give the floor first to Paula to finish up this sort of experience sharing, and then we come to your specific questions on how the cases have been selected in different clinics, how they are referred to, and the strategic litigation meaning, which is quite an interesting case as well. So we'll come to these questions a bit later, but Paula, would you, should I share the screen, or will you?
Yeah, because I'm not very strong in technology. So if you could pull up the
I do.
The slide.
I'm sure you are.
I'm an 80s baby. So,
Okay. So old.
So I know how to do the Spice Girl choreography, but Zoom is a bit new for me.
Okay, it's coming. Give me a second. Okay, here you go. So
Okay.
go on.
Okay, perfect. So I know it's a bit late, and let's be honest, being on a Zoom eventually gets tiring when you hear a lot of people, because it's not the same like in real life. So there's just 3 points that I want to really focus on today, that I hope is clear. And if there's any questions on it, please feel free to ask about it. I also generally speak fast, so it's okay if you put up your hand and say slow down, because I get carried away and passionate. But anyways, so today I'm going to look at the clinic's impact on students and how students also impact the clinic. That's the first point. Then the second point is that I want to look at how clinics actually look at the so-called, because we often speak of this thing called multidisciplinary, but what does it really mean in practice? And then the last thing that I'm going to focus on is look at also diversity in terms of how does diversity play a huge role in clinics, especially in this field of refugee law. And then lastly, I will also just shed some light or a reflection on areas that I think still need some work to be put on. So I hope that's very clear in my 3 objectives I'm trying to reach for today. So with that being said, obviously by now you should know I'm from the IUC, which is the International University College of Turin, and I have been a former student at the clinic myself, and it's been a lovely experience under the leadership of Ulrich Steger. I've learned a lot. I've gained a lot of perspective. I've also challenged myself. I've also grown from the first day that I started as a student to the midway to now, and I'm still in a lot of questioning even myself on many concepts that I think seem straightforward, but it's not actually so straightforward when you take some time to think about it. So anyway, our university partners with the Eastern Piedmont Alessandria and also universities of Turin. And since its inception, we've had over 300 students from 55 different countries. And there is an immense wealth that all of these students have left. It's almost like if we had footprints, we'd be stomped. So yes, they've left a huge impact on the clinic, and the clinic has also impacted their lives in many ways. I'm one of the examples. So that brings us to the next point. This is just the introduction in case you were wondering which point it's part. So now I will start with the multidisciplinary perspective. So the point is that since I started at the university, Ulrich and I have been looking at how could arts actually help lawyers in this field or students to improve their legal skills. And one of the biggest things I think that, of course, legal clinics are about, the social impact and bringing students in, doing advocacy for the public. But I felt that one thing that was really missing at the time when we thought of this idea was that how do you actually allow minorities to be part of the education process? Because if you think about it, you can see like a lot of women, for example, they are for women's rights. But could you imagine if you had a bunch of 20 men that were lawyers with good intentions about women's rights and never allowed a woman to be part of the table? That would completely outrage a lot of people to think, why should only men make these decisions about women? And likely so, I think that our law clinic is looking at how to move even further by saying, how do we include migrants to be part of the education process, so that we're not just talking about migrants, helping migrants, but we're also making them part of the education process, which is now even looking at how do migrants contribute value to clinics, which is a very futuristic step, in my opinion. To say that, well, if we're going to be talking about migrants, how about migrants also speak for themselves and say, how do they want to be treated? What are the areas that they think we need to focus on? And so the arts is one way that allows musicians to be part of the education process by looking at cultural needs, looking at even linguistic, because you'd learn a song, for example, in their language. So, even your mouth is getting used to pronouncing certain names, certain words, etc., etc. Even sources, you get to learn about how communities think about themselves based on how they write music about themselves. Cultural norms because of how they express it through the art, which art and culture pretty much normally goes together. So that's just the perspective of saying that, yes, we could have a multidisciplinary approach, which is saying, okay, we want to work with the anthropologist, the lawyer, the activist, but I think what art does is say, how does the student actually incorporate many different fields of study into their forms of teaching, which is different from, you know, a student just going to a center and then collaborating or cooperating, whatever you want to call it. So that's the perspective of multidisciplinary. I hope that gives you a bit of an overview. Of course, it's much more complex, but for purpose of time and Zoom, I hope that it's sufficient enough for you. Then we move to the next slide. So obviously, speaking about the multidisciplinary from before, why it's really important to have it is because, you know, real cases requires real people with real stories. The obvious. So obviously, you know, you need to have a multidisciplinary approach, because when you're speaking with a migrant or dealing with a real case on hand, you're going to be faced with a lot of things that is maybe uncomfortable, complex, linguistically, there's a lot of barriers, etc., etc. So having coming from a multidisciplinary education should already prepare you for that live case that you're going to be facing. So this is one part that we think is really important to focus on, because it's not like you can meet a migrant and then say, okay, wait, let me call the anthropologist, and then we can figure out the story, and then I'll ask you the next question, because working on these cases requires a bit of a personality as well, requires a bit of insight, etc., etc. So that is why the multidisciplinary, again, reinforces why it's really important for students to have a more holistic education and not just a legal education per se. And then we move to the next slide, where even the stateless clinic is something that we've basically cooperated with Roma Tre and Naples University. And again, this is something very new, which I think has been a really good initiative, because it's been student-led, student organized, and student set up. So this is one example that shows like how students are able to collaborate, especially with technology, that even though they're in 3 different states, they're able to collaborate and form this new clinic and deal with very complex issues, which has been a really good advantage for students in this area as well. And then again, we've got more activities, which is like against human trafficking law clinic, the refugee law clinic in prison, strategic litigation. These are all different projects that's been, again, student-led, student-formed. Students have been very vibrant in these areas. And that's been a really great help. And then basically we can move on all the way to the clinical research on detention. Again, this has been something that's also been very important, because, you know, activism also requires us to shed light on what are the human rights abuses and what are ways to go about activism. So last year we did a event in Turin. I don't know if you remember, Uli, the one we did the 15th of December. So one of that, again, was like looking at bringing different actors together and using the arts to raise awareness to the people that were present there. So again, you know, some of the activities do require you dealing with migrants, but sometimes it also requires you looking at actors in the field and how to create awareness. And yes, we often use data, we use language, but sometimes also using visuals and art is also a good way of bringing activism in this field when it comes to advocacy. So yes, I think this brings us to my last point, which is then diversity, which is just, again, stressing the fact that I think it goes without saying that we've had so many students from different countries that have all contributed their cultural understanding, their cultural experiences, which is very important, because migration at the end of the day is about multiculturalism, in the sense of getting to know different cultures, how to speak, how to navigate very complex human rights issues. And I think what has been really important as well is that our law clinic has been also very involved with the Nigeria human trafficking clinic, and that's really important, because we're also looking at how do coordinate, you know, so it's not just about you focusing on your law clinic, but how do law clinics coordinate with different clinics in different spaces to gain rapid information, to have collaboration that goes beyond the so-called institutions that normally requires you to have a very big bureaucratic, whatever you want to call it. You've got to go through a lot of bureaucracy to get to certain conclusions. But with students, you know, setting up these different kind of centers and hubs, and then having communication, dealing with cases, it really helps to allow the cases and issues to go much faster. And then I will just conclude by saying that the few areas I think that we're still lacking and that would be good to look into the future is that I think we haven't really looked into issues of disability and mental health. Particularly as one could assume that if you've come from a very traumatic migration route, how don't we know that your mental health has been impacted, and that like could that also be hampering the way that you are able to give your case? What is the advocacy around mental health issues? Because I mean, we're dealing essentially not just with a refugee, but also with trauma patients or trauma clients. And we haven't really put a lot of mental health focus there, because again, mental health often looks from a privileged perspective, because it's like, oh, if you're from Europe and you're working too hard, it's like, oh, you're depressed. But you know, you just cross the whole sea with seeing people die, being raped along the way. And then you come to an office and you get asked, okay, what is your story? Because we want to fight for your rights. But what about the mental health of the person? Like, do we consider these things, and how that also impacts their ability to speak to us, which then impacts the way how we're able to fight for their rights? So that brings me to the conclusion. Mic's dropped.
Thank you, Paula. You run us through all your ideas that you have to some extent also very much contributed to it, to our clinic. So thank you so much for not only being here tonight, but also introducing many of those ideas that you just have said into our clinic. I think this was excellent in my view to give people that haven't really heard about law clinics a good overview why law clinics are a good field of first of all, showing and demonstrating that law clinics are useful in a certain way, and in different ways potentially, in terms of impacting on students, but also impacting directly on clients, beneficiaries, and potentially even on migration law as such. But also showing that actually through the clinics you can experience and potentially even create different kind of activism, which is often going away from just working in a certain field and looking at your field that you know and just being active in this field, but showing over the border into the different aspects of activists and trying to get engaged with them and creating sort of community where you all profit from each other, but also providing the ground for getting community integrated in this work, and giving a voice to those who actually are often left out in a sort of way. I think what often the problem is that we create a sort of a way to support people, which is a way to which is not really changing the way those people experience the society, but it's more about actually sometimes even sustaining the way how they are treated in society by providing a service that those people need. So I think it's also important that we engage. I think that resonates a lot with Paula was just saying in the end, is that we really have to create spaces where we really engage with communities directly in order to come to a point where the support is not just a support, but it's really creating something new for them and for us. So I think that's or for us in the end. I think that's the idea, not for them and the us, but for us. Anyway, I have two questions. Which I think we could start with, and then hopefully some of you who have been just hearing maybe whether you have been in a clinic already, you know clinics, you have cooperated with clinics, or whether you would like to know something more, we maybe share your experience with clinics you had in the past. Maybe something like this can also happen in this last half an hour that we have. So I would start with the first question, how actually, and maybe different clinics here in the room can just share their experience, how you actually come across with your cases, how they have been selected somehow, whether there are some criteria for selection, and how these sort of referrals to the clinic are coming through. So maybe that's something we could start with. I don't know who would, maybe Berlin, you could start how you actually come to your clinics, clinical cases.
Paula, do you want, or should I?
If you would like, you can go ahead.
Yeah,
I can add.
yeah, great. Okay. We don't choose really our cases. They basically come to us. But obviously there are limits. Like we are just trained to give legal advice, and as you all may know, there's many forms of interception between different fields of law. So people who have like a criminal case for illegal entry to the country, and we are very cautious, or divorce situations. Many times migration law intercepts with different other fields of law. So when people come to our counseling, we will refer them to other organizations, but there's, I think, no case that we refuse, like in the migration law field. Just sometimes it's very, like if it's like a Dublin situation and it's the last day for the horrible 1 week delay to file a complaint, sometimes we will send them to the, I don't know the word in English, Rechtsantragsstelle. We have this institution at the administrative court where you can go there and directly file, and we advise to do that because just the time is so short. But if people come with a migration asylum case, usually our counseling offices will always try to help them in some way, even if it's referring to the right trustworthy lawyer. Maybe I'm out since 1 year, so Paula has a more fresh experience.
I only wanted to add and maybe shortly introduce the consultation team I am currently working in, because the team is called Bus of Resources, and the idea is to drive to the reception centers in and around Berlin. We actually don't have a bus, it's only called Bus of Resources. But we also try to extend our network to reach people within reception centers, and they are connected to us by the social service workers there.
Okay, thank you. I think this was quite clear. I will, before I come to how this in our case, maybe Martina, do you want to say something about Rome?
Yes. Yes, in Rome, I think is a situation is similar to Berlin, because we didn't choose the cases, they arrived. Of course, there are some cases that are probably have a quickly resolution, and some other that, you know, we need to give different kind of appointments during 1 month or 2 months, or to think about the person's different moment to give consultant to them. But yes, and usually they we have many associations that send to us people, but the most part they come independently, and usually they have some of the friends of the families members that were followed by us. They were, so it's the information circulates from them, directly.
Okay, maybe just one word on us. For us, it's a bit slightly different in the way that we didn't really choose to open up a new front desk in Turin when we started our clinic, because at those times, and it's still the case, we have a lot of front desks for migration support already in Turin. There's a huge, I've heard about the number last time, it was more than 70 lawyers working specifically and somehow even specifically focused only on migration law. So we have quite a number of experts already working in this field. So we decided to go on specific areas where legal support would not be easy to find. And it's often where lawyers not yet start to work with clients in this area. For example, in preparation for the interview or asylum interview, for example, lawyers would not be intervening there. So the clinic has created a sort of speciality to work in this area, or for example, on detention and so on. So that's why we decided not to have a front office, and that's your questions is really important, because to some extent we work on referrals coming from NGOs, coming from other actors somehow, front desks, etc., that would refer to us the clinics. The cases. And this causes sometimes questions, and I know that there's a question for a lot of law clinics that have not specifically a front desk. The question of selecting your cases, because you might select your cases out of pedagogical interest, or you select your case for the purpose of other dynamics that are not specifically the dynamic of support, if you want, to some extent. So you have to be cautious about this and careful about this as well. So this can happen, and sometimes this creates a wrong atmosphere. Although sometimes, even if you find in any case a lifeline activity, it is useful in any case. I think the selection process can be tricky, or give the wrong idea that practice can be simple in a way, simpler than because you choose simpler cases, for example, or can be more complex because you choose more complex cases. Anyway, so that's the selection process might trigger some problems, and I agree. This is an issue which is sometimes difficult. I don't know if it's answered to your question clearly. If yes, we can go to the next question, which is interesting as well, whether there is some appetite for clinics collaborating on larger strategic litigation activities to sort of create a community to engage in strategic litigation. I would say, well, I don't know, Carlo, maybe you want to say something on this. Because I know you did.
So I have to pretend to be an expert on strategic litigation that I'm not.
No, you did as a clinic something very interesting on this, so that's why I think.
No, I mean, I won't answer to Kyle's second question, because actually I don't know. I mean, I think there are multiple projects of collaborations between different law clinics in Italy, but also, I mean, the one that Paola was presenting about statelessness is just an example. So 3 legal clinics from Roma, Torino, and Napoli working together on real cases of statelessness. So access to justice for people who basically do not have a citizenship. It's just an example, but there are also other, I mean, examples across Europe, and maybe Ulrich knows better than me the examples, because he's very active in the European network of clinical education. So, but I think, I mean, in our experience, the Roma 3 legal clinic, we actually decided to work more on the, let's say, grassroots level. So basically, we always say that we prefer doing diffuse litigation rather than strategic litigation, in the sense that we prefer to work on maybe less not on leading cases like Supreme Courts, European courts, whatever, but on more on the like first instances, on the level of first instance and course of merit, but that was our choice, and I think also because that's what people really ask for, like usually people ask for legal assistance to and support to solve their case, their problem, and not to make, I don't know, a leading judgment or whatever. But that's just our experience. I mean, there are, of course, very important actions that have been lodged before the Supreme Court, the European Court of Human Rights, the one that our colleagues from Berlin were mentioning before, about the Syrian refugees. But I mean, there are, of course, it's a very important field of action, and many clinics are involved. But I mean, I couldn't answer actually. So
no, I thought about your case about criminalization, because I think that's it's a very important strategic litigation case, which actually came to something true.
Yeah, but actually that's true. We got this judgment from the Supreme Court of Cassation, which is the Supreme Court of Italy, about facilitation of irregular immigration. Was a case against 4 Eritrean refugees in Rome, and I mean, that was a case that as a clinic we followed, supporting the defense team, because of course in Italy clinics and students and law students cannot represent people in court, of course, which is not, for example, the case in the US, which is a different system. But we support the legal team in this case, but we took it over from the beginning, and we didn't know that was going to become a leading case. But yes, the judgment was and the decision, I mean, the reasoning was very important, and hopefully will open the way, let's say, for some change in the application of the criminal offense of irregular facilitation of irregular immigration in Italy. Let's see, because it's always unpredictable the way in which prosecutors and judges actually work.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. Yeah, I know that also the Berlin clinic was very much involved in such litigation, specifically on Samos. So maybe Nora, you want to say something about this?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this aspect of like the kind of on the ground work that we do, and we were always like also very activism driven, but somehow those two things really went together on Samos, where we realized that in some cases there was nothing else to do than to go to the big guns basically and ask for interim measures to the European Court of Human Rights, because we had like women who gave birth in tents and no accommodation, medical attendance for chronically sick people. So many situations where we tried many different routes, referrals to UNHCR, but there is no administrative court on Samos that you can apply to. So we then thought, okay, we will just challenge the whole hotspot system and bombard them with complaints. And we really won many of them, like around 42 or something. It's a long time ago. I don't quite remember the numbers, but it was very impressive what the team there did, like how they all stuck together and like worked to file those individual complaints, to get the statements, get the pictures or the proof. And that was the only thing that got the people moved out of the hotspots and into proper accommodation. So there was really like nothing else that could be done there really than to choose that resort. It was not like we're thinking about a big systemic change and approached it from that side. It was just like the practical problem, and there was only the big systemical change approach that we could take to somehow solve that, just with interim measures. That's not a final decision, but for the people there, just change something for the moment. Yeah, that's our experience, like with the SAMUS project.
Exactly. Yeah, I think this was quite impressive. But actually, gives rise to exactly the same what Carla was also saying. The approach was not so much just to be engaged in a strategic litigation, at least what I heard from your approach at those times, was just using case after case after case after case for some systematic change, which is, in your case, was the only way to go with the European Court of Human Rights at those times. But it's, yeah, that's very interesting. Maybe just one word, because Kylie was mentioning the Amsterdam Migration Law Clinic. Indeed, we had actually a very interesting case together with the Amsterdam Clinic. This also was an interesting cooperation on a third-party intervention we did to Turin together with at Palermo Law Clinic, but also with Amsterdam in particular. So this was an interesting experience to have different sort of approaches, different sort of also knowledge put together. We had different teams from Amsterdam, Turin, and Palermo working together. So that was great, actually. So greetings back to Amsterdam. Lulia has a question which I think is about the website of the Berlin Law Clinic, in particular to the EU-Russia Civil Society Forum. I don't know if Nora, you know a bit more about this project. Otherwise, I actually know a bit about this, so I can also give some feedback on this. But please maybe go ahead if you, Paula, or Nora, you know. No, so this is a project which came into place by some former let's say, members of the board of the Refugee Law Clinic, and some years ago, that was a cooperation with civil society organizations in Russia in particular also law clinics. You have to know that Russia is a place where more than 300 law clinics exist, and they have a network of law clinics. It's a quite, let's say, it was a very interesting situation where a lot of services, but also activities have been created by law clinics, in particular in Russia. Their work has been threatened since the war has taken up quite dramatically, until, for example, that now I have heard that no outside cooperation can be done with the law faculty, with NGOs anymore. Law clinicians have problems to speak up, and so on. So it's quite a tricky moment at the moment. But the project at those time was a project which actually brought together different civil society organizations from Europe, mainly law clinics, with Russian civil society organizations and law clinics in particular. We had different meetings. I have been in one or two of them as well, where we have met them, and the Refugee Law Clinic in Berlin had a specific coordination role for those kind of meetings. They have invited them over to Berlin. They have been in Moscow, for example, as well, to exchange, have students exchange, etc., etc. the project was great. In my view, it was an interesting way to start cooperation. Now the situation has obviously completely changed, and I must say it has also, let's say, from the outside, it's looking it's very difficult, let's say, to understand what is the situation exactly in Russia for the law clinics. Our Ukrainian friends, for example, in the European network, they certainly have a very problematic view on the law clinics in Russia, because they haven't really seen any kind of really strong reaction against the war from the law clinic movement. At the same time, I also believe that's not really easy for them to do so. But you know, in this kind of tension, you have to place the situation at the moment. I don't know, Julia, if this is something you know about, you want to speak about. You can also be invited to speak if you want, or whether this explanation was sufficient.
I just wanted to say I do actually remember it now. It's kind of a few years ago, and it's kind of testament to how many balls we throw in the air. And it's yeah, it's kind of a lot going on.
Yeah, that's also, I mean, you have to, that's, I'm talking for the others, you have to bear in mind, a refugee law clinic in Berlin is a huge enterprise. I haven't seen such a law clinic. Can you maybe recall how many students you have always engaged, how many cases I don't know if you have some statistics, that would be nice to share. But it's just to showing that this is really important, and also what is important, and that's something which is not easy to recover all the time, is the memory of the different years, because each year or every 2 years, basically the management of the clinic changed, so which is very healthy in a way, but it's also very conflicting in a way, because you lose a bit of your institutional memory each time. So it's very hard actually often to keep this memory clear. But at the same time, it's a very useful process to get healthy. So I don't know, maybe you would say something on this, would be great.
Yeah, I can account for maybe 11 teams inside Berlin. And I think active members, most of them have around 10 to 15. Some are smaller, but most of them have around 10 active members to provide consultation weekly. I am also currently accompanying the new training process for this year, and I think at the first introduction meeting, there were around 120 people that were willing to start the training program this year, and it still are around 60 to 80 people participating. And I think usually in the end of the training process, there's less and less people that actually finish the program. And I can't really name the number of inactive members and participants, because a lot of people that have done the training program are still around somewhere in either other projects or are cycling back to the law clinic. Yeah, and I think it's unique, or maybe it's not unique, but the training is actually open for also non-law students. So a lot of people from other courses of study are joining into the program.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, like, those 120 are like the lowest numbers we have in years, for like a variety of reasons. But there were like many times where we had in the beginning classes like 300 to 350 people in the first classes, and that was actually super important for us, because it showed the university that there's interest in that field, and it gave us a sort of credibility, because if students want to learn that and do want to participate in this, yeah, that really helped us a lot, this engagement from so many students. And for the cases, I did the math, but it's 2 years ago, and it was something about 60 cases per week are counseled, and that's how we also changed our supervision concept, because when we were like thinking about the numbers, we thought, okay, we need more supervision. It's so many cases. We need a more closer connection between the supervising person and the teams to to take care of that, to balance that. So as you said, it's quite an enterprise, and I think that's the advantage, but also it can be a problem because it's dependent on people who are willing to engage, mostly for free. And that stops at a certain point when people leave university, when they want to take a job. Also, voluntary work is super privileged work, because who has the time to work for free and do those things? And yeah, that's just what I wanted to add.
Okay, thank you. That's just reminds me of something which is, I think, interesting to elaborate, maybe not now in the last 2 minutes, but elaborate further on, is the fact that, of course, law clinics providing legal support, legal services for free, it doesn't really mean that they should, and that's something we have to be careful with, is should somehow continue to provide an idea of society where the state is absent in a certain way on legal support, because that's what's happening. Why do we intervene in free legal support? Is because in most of the areas where the law clinics are intervening, actually legal support is not provided by any kind of authority, by any kind of legal lawyers that actually provide these supports. So there is a need to state all the time, in my view, that we're not there to let's say to replace the work and the duty of the state to provide sufficient support, but it's something which we also have to make clear that voluntarism is not a solution in a way. It is great for pedagogical and training aspects as well, but we don't have to facilitate this process too much. But anyway, let's click at a complete new chapter, which I don't think we can address here, but I think this is something which we gonna have to address to some extent with the other classes as well, or courses as well, because that's part of the movement of grassroots activism in this field, have to address in different kind of ways all the time. Any last word, and then we close, from anyone who wants to say something? From Carla?
Just very quickly, a few words. I really wanted to thank you all for this discussion and your presentations, because I think it was great to start this module with this discussion. I wouldn't call it lesson, because I think it made very clear how in this case students actually make difference inside the university, but also outside in the society, and how students and activists can actually make difference in supporting migrant people in their claims for justice, which are of course claims for social justice. And I think it's a very inspiring example about how we can, as citizens, as privileged people, as Paula was saying before, we can be in support of people on the move, also changing a bit, for example, how university works. So changing from the inside this institution, which is often detached from the outside, from the surroundings, from local communities. It's this institution that is like, I don't know, a bit far from the reality, from what happens outside, and in this way supporting, I mean, the people who are actually changing the world, no? And we are just in support of their struggle. So I just wanted to thank you all for this discussion and your contributions.
Thank you, Carlo. Anybody else? Last words?
I think I will maybe just add a last 2 cents to say thank you so much, everyone, for your lovely presentations as well. And I've gained new insights as usual. Didn't catch everything quite because, you know, at some point these Zoom things zoom in and zoom out. But it was lovely to meet everyone and to see what everyone's doing. I think I would just really reinstate or reinforce the idea that I think it's really important for law clinics to continue doing the great work that we are doing. But I think, you know, we also need to be self-critical and push ourselves even further and not feel like, oh, we are saving the world and we're so good, but even look at how can we really make like the refugees part of their own advocacy. Because I think once we present politicians with real people, it's different from, you know, an academic report, an academic journal or whatever it is. But when, you know, people see real people, it changes the perspective. And I think similar to the civil rights movement in the US, you know, only until Black voices were allowed to advocate for themselves, like Martin Luther and so forth, it really made that big difference, you know. So having had white lawyers in the civil rights movement didn't really do much for civil rights. I mean, it did, of course, I'm not going to say it didn't, but I think we also have to be critical at how we use data, organizations, language, and we don't actually look at people in the discourse. So I'd really just emphasize again that I think as law clinics, we should kind of, you know, pat ourselves on the shoulder, get our gold star, but move on to the next stage to say, we need to look at self-determination now.
That's a brilliant conclusion. I have nothing more to say. I think our sort of plan is set. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, everyone, and have a lovely evening. And Carla, do you want to remind what the next appointment is?
Next Thursday, same time, same place.
Okay, cool.
Sorry,
Nice
next
evening.
Tuesday or Thursday?
Thursday.
Thursday.
Okay.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.